I drove back to my beach house after 6 weeks away and froze when I saw 5 cars and an RV taking over my yard. My daughter, her husband, and his family were laughing, grilling, and living inside the home my late wife and I built together. Then my son-in-law's father smirked. "Relax, your daughter will own this place someday anyway." I called the sheriff. Hours later, I opened my garage and discovered what they had been secretly hiding there. If this story is already pulling at something inside you, you're exactly where you need to be. Welcome to Dad Family Revenge. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, your country, your city, even just your time zone. I read every single one. Some elements in this story are fictional, crafted for entertainment and education. Any resemblance to real people or places is coincidental, but what I'm sharing with you today matters. The last 3 miles of Highway 12 run right along the water. I know every curve of that road, the way I know the layout of a building I've inspected a dozen times. The soft bend past the marina, the stretch where the pines grow close enough to the asphalt that their roots have started pushing up through the surface, and the exact spot where the ocean opens up wide on the left side and hits you all at once like someone pulled back a curtain you forgot was there. My name is Walter Bennett. I'm 63 years old. For 35 years, I worked as a federal construction inspector, the kind of man who walks into a building before anyone else does and looks for everything that isn't in the blueprints. Cracks in the foundation that the contractor hoped nobody would notice. Load-bearing walls that got moved without a permit. The gap between what was promised on paper and what actually got built. That's what I did for a living. I found the things people tried to hide. I retired 14 months ago. My wife Evelyn didn't get to see it. She passed in March of 2020, breast cancer, 8 months from diagnosis to the end. She was 61 years old, and she had been planning what we would do with my retirement since approximately 1997. She had a list. An actual written list in her handwriting in a yellow legal pad she kept in the nightstand drawer. I haven't opened that drawer since the week after she died. The beach house on Outer Banks was hers. I mean that in every sense that matters. I paid for it, and my name is on the deed, but Evelyn found it. Chose it, designed it, and turned it into the kind of place that felt like it had always existed. We bought it in 1998 for less than it was worth because it needed everything. She spent the first 2 summers fixing it up herself, choosing every piece of lumber, every tile, every window latch. She called it the one that faces the water. Never gave it a proper name. Just that. On the south side of the back porch, she planted a sunflower garden the second summer we owned the place. She put those seeds in the ground herself on her knees in the March dirt, and said sunflowers always turn toward the light, no matter how dark it gets. She planted that garden every single March until the March she couldn't anymore. I've been coming back to the house every month since she died. Not to stay. Just to maintain it, open the windows, run the faucets, walk the dock, make sure the roof held through the last storm. I'd drive the 3 hours down from Wilmington, spend a few hours moving through the rooms, like I was checking items off an inspection list, and then I'd get back in the truck before the place got quiet enough that I could hear her in the kitchen. This Friday I'm coming back after 6 weeks away. I've been in the Pacific Northwest reviewing federal construction projects, a bridge rehabilitation in Oregon, a federal courthouse expansion in Washington State. 6 weeks of drafty site trailers and bad coffee and the particular loneliness of hotel rooms in cities where nobody knows your name. I turn onto Quarry Point Road, and my chest does the thing it always does. On this stretch loosens a little like a knot, working itself free. The salt air coming through the window. The light on the water through the trees. Then I turn into my driveway, and my foot comes off the gas. I count 5 vehicles I have never seen before. A black SUV, 2 pickup trucks, a sedan with out-of-state plates, and a dent in the rear panel. A red Jeep parked sideways across the lawn, like whoever left it there didn't particularly care. And behind all of them, backed up along the side of the garage with its leveling jacks pressed down into Evelyn's grass, a 30-foot RV with the power cord running through my fence rail into my outdoor outlet. Smoke is rising from the back of the house. My grill. Music is coming from the back porch. My back porch. My chest tightens so hard and so fast that I press one hand flat against my sternum just to feel something solid. I sit in my truck at the bottom of my own driveway and I don't move. I don't honk. I don't roll down the window and shout. I pick up my phone and I call the Dare County Sheriff's Office because I have spent 35 years learning that the worst thing you can do when you find something wrong in a building is start pulling at it before you know what's holding it up. Deputy Marcus Webb pulls up in 9 minutes. I watch him in my rearview mirror, a broad-shouldered man in a tan uniform who gets out of his cruiser without hurrying, which I immediately appreciate. He walks to my window, and I hand him my license before he asks for it. "Sir, you called about unauthorized individuals on your property." "That's correct," I say. "Multiple vehicles, multiple people. I am the owner of record, and I did not authorize any gathering on this property." He looks up toward the house, takes in the smoke, the music, the RV with its jacks down in my grass. His expression doesn't change much, but something behind his eyes sharpens. "You know any of these people?" "I know some of them," I say, and my jaw tightens as I say it. "That's not the same as them belonging here." Deputy Webb nods once. "Let's go take a look." I get out of the truck for the first time. The full picture hits me harder than I expected, and my chest squeezes like something inside it is being wrung out. There are people everywhere, adults I've never seen, sitting in lawn chairs that came from my garage, teenagers throwing a football across Evelyn's flower bed, a woman I don't recognize carrying a casserole dish through my back door like she was raised in that kitchen. Coolers stacked on my porch steps, towels draped over the railing, and on my back porch in the chair, Evelyn picked out herself from a furniture shop in Wilmington, the teak chair she sat in every single evening of every summer we spent here. A heavy-set man in a golf shirt is leaning back with a beer can resting on his knee like he owns the place. Because in his mind I think he already does. My daughter Madison sees me first. She's standing near the grill with a paper plate in her hand, and when her eyes find me across the yard, something crosses her face. Not guilt, not quite, but something close to it. Something that flickers and disappears before she has time to decide what to do with it. She sets the plate down on the picnic table and walks toward me with her chin up, and I think she rehearsed this moment. She knew I was coming back sometime. She had a version of this conversation already prepared. "Daddy," her voice is careful the way you hold something fragile. "You're home early." That's what she says. Not "I'm sorry." Not "I should have called." Just "you're home early." Like I'm the one who showed up at the wrong time. My throat tightens so hard I have to breathe through it before I answer. "Early from what, Madison?" This is my house. Before she can respond, the man in the teak chair stands up. He's 66 years old. Richard Carter, Madison's father-in-law. A man I have shared exactly 4 Thanksgiving dinners and 1 wedding with, and who has smiled at me at every single one of them in a way that never reached his eyes. He spreads his arms wide like I just walked into a surprise party thrown in my honor. "Walter, there he is." His voice booms across the yard. "Come on, man, relax. We're all family here." Behind him, Madison's husband Ryan steps out from the cluster of people near the grill. Ryan Carter is 38, lean with the kind of easy smile that takes practice to maintain. He extends his hand toward me like a man greeting a business associate. "Walter, Good to see you. We were just... Deputy Webb, I say, and I don't take Ryan's hand. This is my property. I have not authorized any of these individuals to be here. Ryan's hand drops. His smile stays, but something underneath it goes very still. Richard steps forward, planting himself between me and the deputy, with the confidence of a man who has talked his way out of difficult rooms before. Officer, this is a family situation. We're celebrating Madison and Ryan have got a lot going on right now, and we all just wanted to get together somewhere nice. Walter's been traveling, the place was sitting empty. Is your name on the property deed, sir? Deputy Webb asks. Richard's mouth opens, closes. His face reddens from the collar up. I didn't think so, Webb says quietly and opens his notepad. Madison steps closer to me then, and her eyes are bright with tears. She's working hard not to let fall, and her voice drops low so the others won't hear. Daddy, please, can we just talk about this like a family? You don't need to make it into something official. And I look at my daughter, my only daughter, the girl Evelyn rocked to sleep in a house 300 miles from here. The girl who has her mother's eyes and her mother's way of tilting her head when she's trying to understand something. And my heart breaks open a little at the edges in a way I haven't let it do in a long time. But I look past her at the teak chair sitting empty now that Richard has moved away from it. The chair Evelyn sat in the last summer she was well enough to make the drive down. The last summer she could walk to the water's edge without stopping to rest. Madison, I say, and my voice comes out steadier than I feel. I'm talking about it like a family. One name is on the deed to this property. One. She presses her lips together hard, and I watch her swallow something that might be an argument or might be a sob. Richard tries one more time. His voice drops the friendliness and goes somewhere harder. You're making a mistake, old man. Your girl's gonna own this place someday anyway. We're not strangers. Deputy Webb looks up from his notepad. Sir, I'm going to need everyone to start gathering their belongings. I go back to my truck, and I pull the folder off the passenger seat. 35 years of federal inspections taught me one thing above everything else: always carry your documentation. I have the deed in a clear plastic sleeve, the property tax records behind it, and a copy of the homeowner's insurance policy at the back. I hand the deed to Deputy Webb without being asked. He looks it over, then looks up at Richard. Sir, the owner of record is Walter James Bennett. Is that you? Richard's face goes through several things in quick succession. Surprise calculation, and then a version of injured dignity that I have seen on contractors who got caught cutting corners. He straightens his shoulders and says, "The property is going to belong to my daughter-in-law. Effectively, it's already..." "That's not what I asked you," Deputy Webb says. The yard gets quieter. People who had been pretending not to listen stop pretending. Richard tries one more angle, his voice dropping into something meant to sound reasonable. Officer, I understand you have a job to do. But this man has been absent from this property for 6 weeks. His own daughter has been checking on it, making sure everything is taken care of. We came down to support her. That's all this is. Deputy Webb writes something in his notepad. Then he looks at me. Mr. Bennett, do you wish to formally advise these individuals that they are trespassing on your property? I do, I say. My voice doesn't shake. I'm proud of that because my hands want to. What follows takes about 40 minutes, and it is not graceful. Deputy Webb formally trespasses Richard and Ryan from the property, meaning if either of them sets foot here again without my written permission, they can be arrested on the spot. He writes down plate numbers. He takes identification from every adult present. He is efficient and professional, and utterly unbothered by Richard's escalating attempts to reframe the situation as a misunderstanding. Richard tries 3 more times. First, he appeals to family. We are the grandparents of this woman's future children, for crying out loud. Then he appeals to logic. Walter, you are going to see us at every holiday for the rest of your life. Is this really how you want to start things? Then when neither of those works, he drops the friendly tone entirely, and his voice goes flat and cold. You're going to regret this. I look at him steadily, and I say, I'll take my chances. Ryan says almost nothing through the whole process, which bothers me more than Richard's bluster. A loud man is telling you exactly what he's thinking. A quiet man is deciding what to do next. Madison stands near the back porch with her arms crossed over her chest, and I can see her jaw working like she's chewing on something she can't swallow. When the deputy isn't looking her way, she takes 3 steps toward me and drops her voice low. Daddy, I need you to know that I didn't plan this. Ryan said it was just going to be a small thing. I didn't know there would be this many people I didn't know about the RV. I didn't. Her voice breaks at the edges, and her eyes fill up fast, the way Evelyn's used to when she was trying hard not to cry in front of someone. I didn't think you'd be home until next week. And there it is again. The timing. Not the trespass. Not the 30 people in my yard. The timing. My chest aches with something that isn't quite anger and isn't quite grief, but lives somewhere right between them. I look at my daughter's face, at the tears she's blinking back, at the way her chin is trembling just slightly, and I want badly to reach out and pull her into a hug the way I did when she was 9 years old, and the world had done something unfair to her. But I think about the RV jacks pressing down into Evelyn's grass. I think about the stranger I watched carry a casserole dish through Evelyn's kitchen, and I keep my hands at my sides. Madison, I say quietly, we'll talk, but not today. By 2:30 in the afternoon, the last vehicle pulls out of my driveway. Richard loads his cooler into the back of his truck, with the posture of a man who considers himself the wronged party. He doesn't look at me again. Linda Carter, his wife. A small woman with silver hair who has barely spoken a word through this entire afternoon, pauses at the end of the driveway and looks back at me with an expression I can't read. Not hostile. Something more complicated than that. She opens her mouth like she might say something, then thinks better of it and gets into the passenger seat. Ryan is the last to leave. He walks past me with his hands in his pockets and his eyes forward, and just before he reaches his car, he stops and turns around. Walter. His voice is pleasant. His smile is pleasant. Everything about Ryan Carter is always pleasant, right down to the bone. I hope we can move past this. I don't answer him. I watch him get into his car, and I watch his car back out of my driveway, and I watch it until it disappears around the bend in the road. Then I walk to the back of the house. Evelyn's sunflower garden runs along the south fence, 20 feet of it, thick and tall in September, the flowers turning their faces toward the late afternoon sun the way she always said they would. But someone has left a bicycle leaning against the fence post, and its rear wheel has pressed down into the edge of the bed, and 3 of the stalks near the corner are bent at the base, hanging at wrong angles, broken but not completely severed. I crouch down next to them. I straighten each one carefully with both hands. 2 of them hold. The third doesn't. The stem is crushed too low, and when I let go, it falls back down. I stay crouched in the dirt next to Evelyn's broken sunflower for a long moment, and the feeling that moves through me is so large and so shapeless that I can't find a name for it. It isn't anger anymore. It's something older and heavier than that. I stand up. I go inside. I have work to do. The first thing I do when I get inside is change the door codes. The keypad by the front door, the one by the back, and the gate at the end of the driveway, I reset all three to numbers I have never used before, and I write them down on a piece of paper that goes into my shirt pocket and nowhere else. Then I carry every piece of bedding from the master bedroom out to the back porch, shake it out hard over the railing, and leave it in the salt air. I don't know exactly who slept in my bed, but I know someone did because the pillows were on the wrong side, and there was a water glass on Evelyn's nightstand that didn't belong to me. I remake the bed with clean sheets from the linen closet. Then I sit down at the desk in my study, and I open the security camera application on my laptop. I have 4 cameras on this property: front, drive, back porch, side yard, and the garage. I installed them 2 years ago after a neighbor 3 doors down had his boat motor stolen off the dock. At the time, Evelyn's sister asked me if I was becoming paranoid in my old age, and I told her I preferred the word thorough. I start with the most recent footage and work backward. The first thing I see is today, the 5 vehicles pulling in over the course of yesterday evening, and this morning, the RV backing in along the garage. People unloading coolers and bags, and a portable speaker the size of a small suitcase. I watch Richard Carter walk through my front door without knocking, and my jaw tightens so hard, my back teeth ache. Then I go back further, and that is when my stomach drops. 3 weeks ago, a Tuesday, 2 in the morning, the garage camera picks up a pickup truck I don't recognize pulling slowly into the side yard with its headlights off. 4 men get out. They open the garage side door with a key, my key. They carry in large cardboard boxes, the kind with reinforced corners and foam padding visible at the edges, and they stack them inside the garage with the careful efficiency of people who have done this before. The whole thing takes 42 minutes. Then they get back in the truck and leave without turning the headlights on until they reach the road. I sit back in my chair, and I press both hands flat against my thighs because they have started to shake. I go back further still. 6 weeks ago, the day after I left for Oregon, a single car pulls in. Ryan's car. He parks, goes inside, comes out 20 minutes later carrying a bag I don't recognize. Gets back in his car and leaves. 4 weeks ago, Ryan again, this time with Madison. They stay for what looks like a pleasant afternoon. I can see them on the back porch camera, sitting in the chairs. Madison with her feet up on the railing the way she did as a teenager. They leave before dark. 3 weeks ago, the truck with the headlights off. 2 weeks ago, Ryan alone, briefly carrying something into the garage. 1 week ago, Richard's truck, then a second vehicle I don't recognize. They stay for 2 days. And then yesterday evening, everyone. I count the entries. Carter family accessed my property without permission at least 6 separate times while I was away. Not once. Not twice. 6 times over 6 weeks with a key that belongs to my daughter and was passed to her husband without my knowledge. My chest tightens so hard I stand up and walk to the window just to have somewhere to put the feeling. I pick up my phone and I call Claire Hendricks. Claire is a trust and estate attorney in Raleigh who has handled my legal affairs for 11 years. She is 57 years old, and she has the rare quality of making dangerous information sound completely manageable, which is exactly the quality you want in a lawyer at 11 o'clock on a Friday night. She picks up on the 3rd ring, which tells me she was still awake, which tells me she is exactly the kind of person I need right now. "Walter," she says, "I was wondering when you'd call. Shanila, you heard. Madison called me this afternoon. She wanted to know if I thought her father had grounds to, and I'm quoting her here, overreact." A brief pause. I told her that a man calling the sheriff about unauthorized individuals on his property isn't overreacting. It's called having a deed. Something in my chest unknots slightly for the first time all day. Claire, I need you to listen to what I found on my cameras. I walk her through it. All of it. The 6 entries, the timeline, the truck with its headlights off at 2 in the morning, the boxes going into my garage. When I finish, the line is quiet for a moment. Not the quiet of someone who doesn't know what to say, but the quiet of someone who is thinking very carefully about what to say first. Don't touch anything in that garage, she says. Whatever is in those boxes, don't open them, don't move them, don't clean around them. Photograph everything exactly as it sits and send me the images tonight. Already did, I say. Of course you did. I can hear the focus in her voice sharpen. Walter, I want you to check something else for me. First thing tomorrow morning. Evelyn's desk, the right-hand drawer. I have a reason for asking. My hand tightens around the phone. What kind of reason? The kind I'll explain after you look, she says. Get some sleep if you can. We have a lot of work ahead of us. She hangs up, and I sit in the dark study for a long moment, staring at the frozen camera footage on my laptop screen. The garage door, the truck, the men moving carefully in and out of my property at 2 in the morning, like they knew exactly where they were going, because they did know. Somebody gave them a key and told them the place would be empty. And I already know whose key it was. I don't go to sleep. I close the laptop, and I sit in the study for a while with the lights off. And then I get up and walk through the house the way I used to walk through buildings before signing off on an inspection, slowly, methodically looking at everything. The kitchen, the living room, the hallway, the guest bedroom where someone left a bottle of sunscreen on the dresser and a wet towel on the floor. I pick the towel up and hang it over the shower rod, not because I am a generous man, but because leaving it there would mean looking at it. I end up on the back porch. The teak chair is where it always is, left side of the porch angled slightly toward the water, so that when you sit in it, the ocean fills the whole left side of your vision and the yard fills the right. Evelyn positioned it that way deliberately. She spent 20 minutes adjusting it the summer we bought it, moving it an inch this way and an inch that way, while I stood in the doorway asking if she wanted help, and she told me she did not. I have not sat in this chair since the summer before she got sick. I sit in it now. The wood is warm from the day's heat even this late, and it fits the shape of a person the way good furniture does. Like it was made for exactly this, for sitting and watching the Atlantic go dark in the evening. The sound of the water comes in steady and low, and the air smells like salt and something green and living, and for a moment, just a moment, the tightness in my chest loosens enough that I can breathe all the way down. Evelyn used to say that the ocean at night sounded like the world reminding you that it was bigger than whatever you were worried about. I told her once that was either very comforting or very depressing, depending on the day. She laughed at that. She had a laugh that started quiet and built like it surprised even her. I have not heard that laugh in 4 years and 4 months, and I still reach for it sometimes in the morning in the truck at the end of a long day when I want to tell someone how the day went. I reach for it, and it isn't there. And I have learned to keep moving anyway, because what else do you do? I look out at the water, and I think about what I found on those cameras. 6 times. 6 separate entries into this house over 6 weeks with a key that was mine passed to a man who used it like it belonged to him. And the truck at 2 in the morning, 4 men moving boxes through my garage door in the dark, careful and practiced, knowing exactly what they were doing and knowing the place would be empty. My daughter's key. I don't let myself get angry at Madison right now, sitting here in Evelyn's chair in the dark. Anger at Madison is something I will deal with when I understand more about what she knew and when she knew it. Right now, what I feel is something closer to grief, the specific grief of watching someone you love make decisions you can't protect them from. Evelyn would know what to do with that. She always knew how to hold the hard things without letting them harden her. I watched her do it for 41 years. I watched her hold the news of her diagnosis with both hands steady and look at the doctor and ask what the next step was. I watched her plant those sunflowers in March of her last year, even though she knew she would not be there to see them bloom. And when I asked her why, she said the ground needed the seeds, regardless of whether she was around to see what grew. I press the heels of my hands against my eyes until I see light. Then I drop my hands and I look at the yard. The sunflower garden is just visible in the dark along the south fence, tall stalks, most of them still upright, the flower heads drooping now because there is no sun to turn toward. But they are there. The ones the bicycle didn't reach are still standing, and the two I straightened with my hands are holding their position. And even the broken one is still attached at the base, still technically connected to the plant that grew it. I think about Evelyn on her knees in March, with her hands in the dirt. I think about what she built in this house over 22 years, and what it means that I almost didn't come out here tonight. That I almost stayed inside with the door closed because sitting on this porch hurts in a way that is specific and physical and doesn't diminish. But here is what I know, sitting in this chair at 11:30 on a Friday night, with the Atlantic going dark in front of me. I am not going to sell this house. I am not going to let what happened today convince me to let go of something Evelyn built, because holding on to it became complicated. Complicated is not a reason. Complicated is just what happens when something matters. I am going to find out exactly what was in those boxes. I am going to find out exactly how many times that key was used and by whom. And tomorrow morning, I am going to open the right-hand drawer of Evelyn's desk, the one I have not opened in 4 years because Claire Hendricks asked me to, and because she does not ask for things without a reason. I stand up from the chair slowly, the way a man my age stands up from low furniture, and I go back inside. I leave the porch light on. I have never done that before when leaving the porch. I'm not sure why I do it now. Maybe it's because the light reaching out across the yard toward the garden feels like something Evelyn would have done. A signal. A way of saying I see you. I'm still here. I wake up at 5:45 without an alarm. 35 years of early sight inspections will do that to a man, wire his body to come online before sunrise, whether he wants it to or not. I lie in the remade bed for about 4 minutes, staring at the ceiling, and then I get up, put on the coffee, and pull on my work boots. The garage can wait until there's enough light to photograph properly. I know this. Claire told me to document everything exactly as it sits, and documentation done in poor light is documentation done wrong. So I drink my coffee on the back porch, and I watch the sky go from black to gray to the particular pale gold that happens over the Atlantic on clear September mornings, and I wait. At 6:15, I pick up my phone and start photographing before I touch a single thing. The garage is a 2-car space, and I park only one vehicle here, my truck, which is in the driveway, so the right half has always been used for storage. Garden tools, 2 kayaks on wall mounts, a shelf unit with paint cans and caulk and the various supplies that a beach house requires to maintain itself through hurricane season. The left half, which has always been empty, is not empty anymore. 14 boxes. I count them twice. They are arranged in 2 rows along the left wall with the precision of someone who intended to come back for them, not stacked carelessly, but placed deliberately with enough space between the rows to walk through. Each box is sealed with professional-grade packing tape and labeled with nothing more than a number written in black marker. 1 through 14. I photograph all of it before I open anything. Every angle, every label, the spacing between boxes, the way they sit on the concrete floor, the tape seams. I send everything to Claire in a single batch, and then I stand in the middle of my garage and look at the boxes for a long moment. And the feeling moving through me is not quite anger, yet it is something colder and more focused, then anger, the feeling I used to get when I walked into a building and knew within 30 seconds that something was wrong, but couldn't yet see exactly what. Then I opened box number 1. The contents are wrapped in acid-free tissue paper, and then in bubble wrap, 3 layers of it, and packed in foam inserts, cut specifically to fit whatever is inside. I unwrap carefully, slowly, the way Claire would want me to, touching as little as possible. What I find is a painting. Oil on canvas, maybe 18 by 24 inches, depicting a coastal landscape in the style of someone who learned to paint before cameras existed. No certificate of authenticity, no provenance documentation, no gallery sticker on the back, no insurance record, nothing that tells me where this painting came from, who owned it before, or what it is legally worth. Box 2 holds a bronze sculpture maybe 10 inches tall, wrapped with the same professional care. No paperwork. Box 3. Ceramic pieces, clearly old, clearly valuable, clearly undocumented. I open 4 more boxes and find variations of the same thing. Art objects, decorative items, pieces that a man with Ryan's background would know how to acquire and sell, packed with the expertise of someone who handles valuable things regularly and stored in a location that appears on no business record, no insurance policy, and no tax filing that I am aware of. My phone rings. Claire. "I got your photographs," she says, and her voice has the particular quality it gets when she is working hard to sound calm. "Walter, I need you to close those boxes back up exactly the way you found them and step out of the garage." "Already opened 7 of them," I say. A brief pause. "Close them back up anyway. Photograph the closed state, then step out and lock the door." "Claire." My voice comes out harder than I intend. "Tell me what we're looking at." "What we're looking at," she says carefully, "is a man who used your property as an undisclosed storage location for high-value art objects with no documentation trail. In my experience, there are 2 reasons someone stores valuable items without paperwork in a location that isn't theirs. The first is tax avoidance, keeping assets off the books to avoid IRS reporting requirements. The second is more serious than that. The morning air in the garage feels different than it did a minute ago. Heavier. "Ryan is an art dealer," I say. "Yes," Claire says. "And art dealers who store inventory without documentation in third-party locations are occasionally doing so because the documentation doesn't exist, or because the documentation would raise questions they don't want asked." She stops. "I want to be precise here, Walter. I am not telling you these items are stolen. I am telling you I don't know what they are, and that is itself a problem because they are currently sitting in your garage, which means if someone comes looking for them, the first address they find is yours." My hand tightens around the phone so hard my knuckles ache. "What do I do?" I ask. "You lock the garage," Claire says. "You change that lock today. Hardware store, cash, new deadbolt, keep the receipt. You send me the photographs you took, and you don't discuss this with anyone including Madison until I tell you it's time. I'm going to make some calls this morning." "And the boxes? They stay exactly where they are," she says. "For now, they're evidence. The moment you move them, they become something you have to explain." I step out of the garage into the September morning and pull the door shut behind me. My heart is hitting my ribs with more force than it has since yesterday afternoon in the driveway, and I stand in the side yard, with my hand still on the door handle, breathing the salt air, looking at the ordinary September morning around me. The light on the water, through the fence, slats, the sound of a pelican somewhere overhead. The sunflower garden along the south fence standing gold and quiet in the early light. Ryan Carter stored undocumented art in my garage. In the garage where I keep Evelyn's kayaks. in the garage attached to the house she designed with her own hands and filled with 22 years of our life together. Claire, I say. There's one more thing I need to do this morning. The desk drawer, she says before I can finish. Yes, I know, she says quietly. Delivery companies leave a copy of authorization paperwork at the drop address standard practice. If someone used your property for commercial pickups, there will be a paper trail in whatever filing system Evelyn kept at the house. Go do it. Call me after. I drive to the hardware store in Monteo before 8 o'clock, and I buy a new deadbolt for the garage heavy-duty key differently from the house locks, and I install it myself in 20 minutes. Because I have been installing deadbolts since before the man at the hardware store was born. Then I stand in the driveway with the old lock in my hand, and I look at my phone. Claire said not to call Madison yet about the garage. Not until we understand what we are dealing with. But Claire said nothing about the key. The key that came out of my daughter's hand and ended up in Ryan Carter's pocket and got used 6 times in 6 weeks without my knowledge or permission. That is a conversation I can have without mentioning the boxes. I press Madison's name on the screen. She picks up on the second ring, which means she has been waiting for me to call, which means she has been awake thinking about yesterday, which means some part of her already knows that what happened was not something that gets resolved with a night's sleep and a fresh attitude. Daddy. Her voice is careful and tired and layered with something that sounds like it has been rehearsed and then abandoned. Good morning, Madison. A pause. Then, I wanted to call you last night, but Ryan said to give you space. I note that. Ryan said. Not, I decided. Ryan said. I appreciate that, I say, which is not entirely true but is the most useful thing to say right now. Madison, I need to ask you some things and I need you to answer them straight. Can you do that? She exhales a long, shaky breath that tells me she has been holding tension in her chest since yesterday afternoon. Yes, the key to the house, I say. When did you give it to Ryan? The pause that follows is just long enough to tell me she considered her answer before giving it. About 8 months ago. He said you travel a lot and the house sits empty, and if something happened, a pipe burst or a storm came through, someone should be able to get in quickly to check on things. Did he ask you for it? Or did you offer it? Her breath catches. He asked. But Daddy, it made sense. You're gone for weeks at a time and... Did you know he used it more than once? I ask. My voice stays level. I work to keep it that way, because the alternative doesn't help either of us. The silence that comes back is different from the others. Not the silence of someone choosing words, but the silence of someone whose stomach has just dropped. He told me he went once, in July. He said he checked the dock lines after that storm came through and everything was fine. Madison. I close my eyes for a moment and press 2 fingers against the bridge of my nose. He was at this house 6 times while I was away. The last visit was 11 days long. There were other people here I have never met. What comes back through the phone is a sound I have not heard from my daughter since she was 17 years old, and her best friend moved across the country, without warning, a sharp intake of breath that collapses halfway through into something broken, something that lives in the throat and can't quite make it out as a word. Her voice, when it comes, is barely above a whisper. 11 days. 11 days, Madison. Oh, God. The words come out cracked down the middle. Daddy, I didn't. He told me once. He said once and I believed him and I... Her voice fractures completely and she stops, and I can hear her pulling herself back together on the other end of the line, the particular sound of someone pressing their hand over their mouth to keep the crying contained. I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. Stop, I say, and my own throat tightens in a way that surprises me. Do not apologize for what he did. I gave him the key. You gave your husband the key to your father's house because he asked you to and gave you a reasonable-sounding explanation. I say. That is not the same as what he did with it. She cries, then not the careful, managed tears from yesterday in the yard, but something rawer and more honest, something that comes from deeper down. I hold the phone and I listen to my daughter cry, and I look out at the Atlantic over the fence line, and I feel the particular helplessness of a father who cannot fix the thing that is breaking his child. Ryan's voice appears in the background, low close. The voice of a man who has come to stand near his wife when she is on the phone with her father. I cannot make out the words, but the tone is the tone of someone managing a situation. Madison's crying steadies, then stops, too quickly. Madison, I say, are you alone right now? A beat. Ryan's here. Okay. I keep my voice even. I'm going to ask you one more thing, and I want you to think about it before you answer. Did you know people were staying at the house, other than what Ryan told you about July? No. The word comes out immediate and firm, the firmness of someone who wants to be believed and is telling the truth. No, Daddy, I had no idea. All right, I say. Another pause, then quieter with Ryan still somewhere nearby. Is there something else? Something you're not telling me? I look at the garage door with its new lock. I think about 14 boxes sitting in 2 careful rows on my concrete floor. I think about what Claire said this morning. Don't discuss this with anyone, including Madison, until I tell you it's time. We'll talk more soon, I say. I love you, Madison. She says she loves me too, and the call ends, and I stand in my driveway holding the phone with the old garage lock still in my other hand. And what I feel is not anger and not grief, but something that sits directly between them, the specific ache of a man who has just confirmed that his daughter has been lied to by someone she trusted completely, and who cannot yet tell her the full truth of it because the full truth is still coming into focus. I set the old lock on the tailgate of my truck. Then I go inside to open Evelyn's desk drawer. Evelyn's study is the smallest room in the house. She chose it deliberately, said she didn't need much space to think, just enough for a desk and a window and a door that closed. The window faces east, which means it catches the morning light before any other room in the house. And in the years when she worked from home, she would be in that chair by 6:30 with her coffee and her reading glasses and whatever she was working on. And I would walk past the open door and see her there and feel something that I did not always have a name for, but that I understood to be the specific contentment of knowing exactly where the person you love most is located in the world. I have not opened the door to this room since the spring after she died. I open it now. Everything is exactly as she left it. The books on the shelf behind the desk are in the order she put them. The reading glasses are folded on top of a legal pad on the desk corner, as though she set them down a moment ago and will be back for them shortly. The purple pen cup she kept, because Madison gave it to her in 4th grade, is still on the right side of the desk, with 3 pens in it, all of them dried out by now, but still standing. On the wall above the desk, a framed photograph of the 2 of us at the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse, 1999, the year after we bought the house. We are squinting into the sun, and Evelyn is laughing at something I said, and I cannot remember what it was, and I have spent 4 years wishing I could. My throat closes up so fast and so completely that I have to stop in the doorway and press my forehead against the doorframe for a moment. Then I breathe, and I go to the desk. The right-hand drawer is the deep one, the kind with 2 levels papers on top and hanging files below. Evelyn kept property documents in here, The original deed building permits from the renovation years, receipts for major repairs, the homeowner's insurance policy, and its annual updates. I know this because I have seen her reach into this drawer 100 times over 22 years, always knowing exactly what she was looking for and exactly where it was. I lift the papers from the top level carefully and set them on the desk. Underneath, in the hanging files, I find what I expected: deed copy insurance documents, a file labeled Contractors, with Reuben's receipts going back 12 years. And at the very back of the drawer, in a plain white envelope with no stamp and no return address, sitting upright between the last hanging file and the back wall of the drawer, I find something I did not expect. I pick up the envelope. Inside is a single sheet of paper. A letter typed and printed addressed to a company called Coastal Art Transport, LLC. The letter authorizes the company to deliver and retrieve items to and from this property address, grants access to the garage storage area, and identifies the authorized representative as Walter J. Bennett, property owner. It is dated 4 months ago. At the bottom of the page on the signature line is a signature. It is not mine. I know my own signature, the way I know my own face. I have been signing my name to federal inspection documents for 35 years, and my signature has a particular quality to it, a slight leftward lean in the W and a compressed loop in the B that developed sometime in my 40s and has never changed. What I am looking at has neither of those things. The W is upright. The B loop is open and round. It is Madison's handwriting. I have been reading my daughter's handwriting since she was 5 years old, learning to write her name on her kindergarten papers. I know it the way I know the road to this house, every curve, every particular characteristic that makes it hers and no one else's. My daughter signed my name to this document. I sit down in Evelyn's chair. The morning light is coming through the east window exactly the way it always did, falling across the desk in that long, pale rectangle that Evelyn used to say was the best light in the house for reading. I am sitting in her chair, holding a piece of paper that tells me my daughter committed forgery under North Carolina General Statutes, Section 14-119, a felony offense that carries real consequences that I do not want anywhere near my child, and that Ryan Carter put there by asking her to sign something without telling her what it actually was, because that is the only version of this that makes sense to me. Madison cried too genuinely on that phone call 20 minutes ago. She was too genuinely shocked by the 11 days too immediately and completely horrified by what she heard. A person who had knowingly forged their father's signature on a document authorizing commercial access to his property does not cry like that. They cry differently, with more management in it, more shape. What I heard from Madison this morning was freefall. That is not the sound of someone who knows what they did. That is the sound of someone who is starting to understand what was done to them. My hands are shaking. Not the small, containable tremor from last night when I watched the camera footage. This is different, deeper, a shaking that starts somewhere in my sternum and works its way outward. I set the letter down flat on the desk and press both palms on top of it and breathe. Then I pick up my phone and call Claire. She answers in one ring. "Did you find it?" "Yes," I say. My voice comes out steadier than my hands feel. It's an authorization letter to a company called Coastal Art Transport, LLC. It grants garage access. It's signed with my name. "Is it your signature?" "No." Claire is quiet for exactly 3 seconds. The quiet of a person absorbing information and immediately beginning to organize it. Then, photograph the letter, the envelope, and the drawer it came from in that order. Do not remove it from the room. I need you to understand something, Walter. Tell me. What you are holding, she says, is a document that someone used to move commercial goods through your property using your identity without your consent. Under North Carolina General Statutes, Section 14-119, signing another person's name to a document without their authorization and with intent to defraud constitutes felony forgery. That is not a small thing. The morning light sits on the desk. Evelyn's glasses sit folded on her legal pad. It's Madison's handwriting, I say. The words cost me something to say out loud that they did not cost me to think. But Claire, she didn't know what she was signing. I would stake everything I have on that. Then help me prove it, Claire says, because right now the document exists and her signature is on it, and we need to understand exactly how Ryan Carter put it in her hand. That's what we need to find out next. I look at the photograph on the wall, Evelyn laughing in the Cape Hatteras light. All right, I say, tell me what to do. Before I tell you what Richard did next, and I promise you, this is where it stops feeling like a family disagreement and starts feeling like something else entirely. Drop the word "still" in the comments right now. Just that one word. Let me know you're here because what's coming next is the part that changed everything. Please note some elements ahead are fictional, added for storytelling purposes. If that's not what you came for, no hard feelings. This is your moment to step away. Claire tells me to photograph the letter, the envelope, and the drawer in that order, and I do it standing right there in Evelyn's study, with the morning light still coming through the east window. When I am done, I close the drawer carefully, the way you close something you intend to come back to, and I walk out and pull the door almost shut behind me, not all the way, just to the point where it rests against the frame without latching. I don't know why I do that. Maybe I am not ready to close it all the way again. I send the photographs to Claire from the kitchen table with a cup of coffee going cold beside me. Her response comes back in 4 minutes. Got them. Don't discuss this with anyone today. I'm making calls. So I wait. Waiting has never been something I am naturally good at. 35 years of construction inspection is not a profession that rewards patience. It rewards showing up early and looking at everything and writing down what you find before anyone has a chance to adjust it. But Claire has been my attorney for 11 years, and I have learned that when she says she is making calls, the correct response is to let her make them. I spend the rest of the morning doing the things a beach house needs after 6 weeks of other people living in it. I go through every room systematically, the way I would walk a job site before signing the completion report. Guest bedroom, someone left a charger behind the nightstand and a half-empty bottle of shampoo in the shower. Living room, the couch cushions have been rearranged, and 2 of the throw pillows Evelyn bought at a market in Beaufort are missing entirely. Kitchen, the spice rack has been gone through, and several things are in the wrong order, which is the kind of detail that most people wouldn't notice. And that bothers me more than I can reasonably explain. Evelyn organized that spice rack alphabetically. She reorganized it every spring. Basil before bay leaf, before black pepper, all the way through to turmeric and thyme. Someone put the cumin before the coriander. I fix it. Then I stand in the kitchen and feel the specific absurdity of caring about a spice rack when there are 14 boxes of undocumented art in my garage and a forged signature in my dead wife's desk drawer. And then I fix the spice rack anyway, because Evelyn organized it that way, and that is reason enough. At 11:15, my phone rings. Not Claire. A number I don't recognize with a Raleigh area code. I let it go to voicemail. The message is from an attorney named Gerald Fitch, calling on behalf of his client, Richard Carter. His voice is measured and professional and entirely too pleasant for what he is actually saying, which is that his client disputes the characterization of yesterday's events as trespass, that Madison Bennett Carter, as the daughter and presumed heir of the property owner, has an implied license to access and use the property, that inviting family members to join her on the property falls within the reasonable scope of that license, and that any further action taken by Walter Bennett against Richard Carter or members of the Carter family may result in a counterclaim for damages related to public embarrassment and reputational harm. I listened to the message twice. Then I forward it to Claire with a text that says, "Richard has a lawyer." Claire calls back in 6 minutes. I can hear the particular quality in her voice that means she has been waiting for exactly this. "Gerald Fitch," she says. "I know him. He does mostly civil nuisance work, the kind of cases where the goal isn't to win, it's to make the other side tired enough to settle." She pauses. The implied license argument is weak. It might work if Madison had a history of regular established use of the property with your knowledge and consent, but she doesn't. And the fact that you called the sheriff and had individuals formally trespassed establishes clearly that you did not consent. Fitch knows this. This letter isn't a legal strategy. It's a pressure tactic. "He's trying to see if I'll back down," I say. "That is exactly what he's trying to do," Claire says. "And here is what you are going to do instead. You are going to send me every piece of documentation you have, the trespass report, the camera footage, timestamps, the photographs of the garage, the photographs of the authorization letter, and I am going to begin building a file that makes Gerald Fitch's letter look like what it is, which is a man throwing sand to buy time." I write that down. Building a file. That is language I understand. That is what I have been doing my entire professional life, building files, creating records, establishing on paper what exists in fact, so that no one can come along later and claim it happened differently. "There's something else," I say. "Ryan called me this morning, while I was in the garage. I didn't pick up." Claire's voice sharpens slightly. "Did he leave a message?" "Yes." I read it from my voicemail. Ryan's voice on the recording is warm and unhurried, the voice of a man who considers himself to be the reasonable party in an unreasonable situation. He says he understands Walter is upset. He says he takes responsibility for the miscommunication around the house visit. He says he would really value the opportunity to sit down together, just the two of them, and talk through things like adults, before this becomes something that damages the family permanently. He says he cares about Walter. He says Madison cares about Walter. He says he hopes Walter knows that. When I finish reading it, Claire is quiet for a moment. "Don't return that call," she says. "I wasn't planning to. I mean, don't return it ever. Walter, not without me present. Ryan Carter is not calling you because he wants to apologize. He's calling you because he wants to understand what you know." She stops. "Forward me that voicemail too. I want a record of every contact attempt from this point forward." I forward it. Then I go out to the back porch, and I sit in Evelyn's chair, and I look at the sunflower garden. The flowers are facing south-southwest in the afternoon light, all of them turning slowly toward the sun the way she always said they would. The broken one I straightened last night is still holding its position, stem bent, but connected head up. My phone buzzes, a text from a number I don't recognize. I open it. 3 words, search coastal stays NC. No name. No other information. Just those 4 words and a period at the end. I look at the text for a long moment, my thumb hovering over the screen. Then I open my browser and I type in the words. The screen loads, and what comes up makes my hand go completely still. The listing loads in about 4 seconds. The main photograph is a wide shot of the front of my house taken from the end of the driveway, the cedar siding the front porch. The 2 rocking chairs Evelyn bought from an estate sale in Corolla back in 2006. The shot is taken in the golden hour, the light coming from the west and hitting the porch boards at exactly the angle that makes old wood look like it was built yesterday. Whoever took this photograph knew what they were doing. They waited for the right light. I scroll down slowly, the way you read a document you need to understand completely before you respond to it. The listing is under the name Coastal Stays NC. The host profile shows the initials RC and a 5-star average across 11 reviews. The property description reads, charming 3-bedroom beach cottage on the Outer Banks. Private lot, ocean views, fully equipped kitchen, outdoor grill, and a peaceful wraparound porch with teak seating. Perfect for families and small groups. Short walk to beach access. The sunflower garden out back is a guest favorite. I read that last sentence twice. The sunflower garden out back is a guest favorite. My hands tighten on the laptop until I make myself loosen them deliberately, one finger at a time. I keep scrolling. The interior photographs are thorough. The kitchen, Evelyn's kitchen with the blue tile backsplash she chose from a salvage yard in Elizabeth City, because she said it was the exact color of the Atlantic on a clear morning in October. The living room with the quilt her mother made hanging on the wall above the fireplace. The master bedroom, our bedroom. The room where I remade the bed with clean sheets yesterday morning, after removing someone else's pillows, photographed with the window light coming through the curtains. Evelyn sewed herself from fabric she found at a market in Monteo, and the back porch. The teak chair positioned exactly as Evelyn always had it, angled toward the water. Photographed from behind, so that the chair faces the ocean, and the ocean fills the frame beyond it, and the whole image looks like an invitation to sit down and stay. I feel something move through my chest that is too large and too shapeless for anger. It presses outward from my sternum in all directions at once, and I breathe through it the way you breathe through something that cannot be hurried. I scroll to the reviews, 11 of them. All 5 stars. Great location, incredibly well-appointed cottage. The porch is exactly what we needed after a long year. We'll be back. Stayed 4 nights with my sister and her kids. The kitchen has everything you could want. Kid loved the outdoor space. Host was responsive and easy to communicate with. One of the best vacation rentals we've ever stayed in. The teak chair on the porch is worth the price of admission alone. We watched the sunset every evening from that chair. I stop on that one. Rate it again. The teak chair on the porch is worth the price of admission alone. Evelyn sat in that chair the last summer she was strong enough to make the drive down. She sat in it every evening with her feet up on the rail and her eyes on the water and a cup of tea going cold in her hand, because she always forgot to drink it before it cooled. She sat in it and watched the sun go down and said it was the finest 40 minutes of any day. Strangers have been sitting in that chair. Strangers have been telling other strangers that it is worth the price of admission. And Ryan Carter has been collecting $289 a night for the privilege. I call Claire. She picks up immediately. I was about to call you, she says. My investigator just found it. I'm looking at it right now, I say. 11 reviews. 5 stars across the board. My voice comes out flat and controlled, in the way that voices do when the thing underneath them is anything but. He charged $289 a night, Claire. I know. Her voice is careful the way it gets when she is managing both the information and the person receiving it at the same time. The listing was taken down, looks like Monday of this week, 2 days after the sheriff's visit. But the cached version is preserved and the reviews are still live. My investigator has already archived everything. How many groups stayed here? At least 4 that we can confirm from the reviews and the booking calendar fragments we recovered, she says. Conservative estimate on the revenue somewhere between $8,000 and $10,000. We'll get a precise number when we pull the LLC financials. $8,000. $10,000. My hands are steady now in the way that hands go steady when the body has run out of the particular kind of energy that causes shaking and has moved into something quieter and more purposeful. The LLC, I say. Coastal Stays NC. Tell me about it. Registered in North Carolina under Ryan Carter's name approximately 7 months ago, Claire says. The registered address is your property, Walter. He used your address as the business address without your consent. That's a separate issue from the rental itself. It constitutes fraudulent business registration and creates a paper trail connecting his commercial operation directly to your property. I write that down. Fraudulent business registration, 7 months ago, my address. Using my property address for his LLC, I say slowly. Without asking me. Without asking you, Claire confirms. And collecting revenue from the rental of your property through that LLC, without disclosing it to you, without your authorization, and without remitting any portion of it to you. Under North Carolina law, that constitutes unauthorized commercial use and unjust enrichment. He profited from your asset without your consent and kept every dollar. I close the laptop. Not because I have finished reading, I have not finished reading, but because I need to look at something other than a screen for a moment. I look at the wall of the study, at the door to Evelyn's room still resting almost closed. Claire, I say. Who sent me the text telling me to search this? A brief pause. I don't know yet, but whoever it was knew about the listing and wanted you to find it, and they didn't want their name attached to telling you. That's someone who is close enough to know what Ryan was doing and frightened enough not to say so directly. I think about Linda Carter at the end of the driveway yesterday afternoon. The way she looked back at me before getting into the passenger seat. The way she opened her mouth and then closed it again. Right, I have a thought about that, I say. So do I, Claire says. But let's talk about it after you see what else my investigator found. Because there is more, Walter. There is considerably more. I press my back against the desk chair and look at the ceiling and breathe. Tell me, I say. What Claire tells me next takes about 12 minutes, and I do not write any of it down. I just listen. She tells me that her investigator recovered the full booking history from the cached listing 4 confirmed reservations across 6 weeks, a total of 26 guest nights at $289 per night, which comes to $7,514 before the platform's service fee. She tells me that the LLC bank account, which the investigator located through the North Carolina Secretary of State's business filing records, shows deposits consistent with those amounts. She tells me that Ryan filed the LLC articles of organization using my property address as both the registered office and the principal place of business. Which means that any legal correspondence, any tax notices, any regulatory mail addressed to Coastal Stays NC goes first to my mailbox. She tells me that one of the guest reviews includes a link to an Instagram post. Send it to me, I say. Walter. Send it to me, Claire. She sends it. The Instagram account belongs to a woman named Terry from Chesapeake, Virginia, who appears to use the platform primarily to document beach vacations and recipes involving cast iron skillets. She has 412 followers. She visited Coastal Stays NC, my house, Evelyn's house, for a long weekend in August, 3 weeks before I came home. Her post has 847 likes. The photograph is taken from the southeast corner of the backyard, looking northwest toward the house in the late morning light. In the foreground, filling the bottom 2/3 of the frame, is Evelyn's sunflower garden in full August bloom, 20 feet of it running along the south fence, the flowers standing tall and dense and golden, every head turned toward the morning sun, the way Evelyn always said they would. The caption reads, "Little slice of heaven on the OBX. This sunflower garden literally made me cry. 10 out of 10 would never leave." 847 people pressed a small heart-shaped button underneath a photograph of my wife's garden. I set the phone down on the desk. My vision does something strange for a moment. Not blurring exactly, but narrowing the way it does when the body is managing something the mind hasn't fully processed yet. I press the heels of both hands against my eye sockets and hold them there and breathe through my nose, slow and deliberate, the way a man breathes when he is in a situation that requires him to remain functional. Evelyn planted those sunflowers in March of 1999. The first year, only about a third of them came up. She said the soil needed another season to learn what she wanted from it, which was the kind of thing she said about gardens and about people with equal sincerity. The second year, the whole bed came in. She stood at the kitchen window looking out at it on the morning they bloomed, and she made a sound that I can only describe as the sound of someone receiving something they had hoped for, but not quite allowed themselves to expect. She planted them every March after that, for 21 years, until the March she couldn't anymore. The last spring, she was well enough to be at the house. She went out to the garden in the early morning, before I was awake, and she put the seeds in herself on her knees in the March dirt. I watched her from the bedroom window. I did not go out to help because I understood, without being told, that this was something she needed to do alone. 4 months later, she was gone. And now, a woman from Chesapeake, Virginia, with 412 Instagram followers, has posted a photograph of that garden to the internet. And 847 strangers have pressed a heart underneath it, and none of them, not one of them, knows whose hands put those seeds in the ground, or what it cost her to kneel in the dirt that last spring, or what the garden means to the man who has been watching it from the kitchen window every summer since she died. Ryan Carter charged people $289 a night to stay in my wife's house, and he used her garden as a selling point. I pick the phone back up. "Claire," I say, and my voice comes out different from how I intended, lower, rougher, like something has shifted in the mechanism that produces it. "I know," she says quietly. She does not say anything else for a moment, which is the right thing to do. "How do we make this stop?" I ask. We already have," she says. "The listing is down. The LLC will be dissolved as part of the settlement process. No one else is staying in that house." She pauses. "But Walter, I need you to understand something. What Ryan did with the listing and the LLC, that is serious, and it is actionable, and we will pursue every dollar of it. But the reason he was able to do any of it is because of something larger that's been in motion for longer than 6 weeks. My investigator found something this morning that changes the shape of everything we've been looking at." I stand up from the desk chair. My legs feel steadier than they have any right to feel. "Tell me," I say. "Ryan has been meeting with an attorney," Claire says. "Not Gerald Fitch, someone different, a family law specialist in Charlotte who handles marital property disputes. The afternoon light is coming through the window at a long angle now. The kind of late afternoon light that means the day is running out. I look at the sunflower garden through the glass, still standing, still gold, still turning toward whatever light is available. He's been planning this for longer than the listing," I say. "It is not a question." "Much longer," Claire says. "And that means we need to move faster than I thought. I'm filing the trust paperwork Monday morning. Walter, don't discuss any of this with Madison yet. Not until I tell you it's time." I look at the garden. Evelyn put those seeds in the ground because she said the garden needed them, regardless of whether she would be there to see them bloom. I think I am beginning to understand what she meant by that. Monday morning comes in gray and quiet off the Atlantic. I'm on the back porch with my coffee when Claire calls at 8:14, which means she has been at her desk in Raleigh since at least 7:30, which is the kind of thing I have always appreciated about her. She does not warm up to difficult information. She delivers it the way a good inspector delivers a findings report. Start with the most significant item, work your way down. Ryan Carter is carrying $290,000 in outstanding debt, she says. My investigator pulled court records and financial filings from New York. 2 years ago, he entered into a business arrangement with a Manhattan art dealer, a joint venture to acquire and resell a collection of mid-century American works. The deal collapsed. The other party sued. Ryan settled for $290,000 payable over 4 years. He has made 3 payments. He is currently 8 months behind on the 4th. I set my coffee cup down on the porch rail carefully. He's been hiding this from Madison, I say. He has been managing the appearance of financial stability while carrying a debt load that would fundamentally change how Madison understands her marriage, Claire says. The vacation rental revenue from your property was approximately $8,000 over 6 weeks. At $289 a night, that is not a solution to a $290,000 problem. But it is a way of keeping the lights on while appearing to be fine. I think about Madison on the phone 4 days ago, her voice breaking when she heard about the 11 days, the way it collapsed in the middle, from something managed into something real. I think about the way Ryan appeared in the background of that call, his voice low and close, repositioning himself next to his wife at the exact moment she was most distressed. She knows there's debt, I say. She told me they've had financial challenges, but she doesn't know the number. No, Claire says. Based on what we've found, Ryan has been selectively disclosing, telling Madison enough to explain certain lifestyle adjustments without telling her enough to understand the actual scope. That is a pattern, Walter. It is not a single omission. It is a sustained, deliberate management of what his wife is allowed to know about their shared financial life. The gray morning sits on the water beyond the fence. The sunflower garden is still in the early light, the flower heads drooping slightly, the way they do before the sun gets high enough to pull them up. My chest aches in a way that has nothing to do with Ryan Carter. It has to do with my daughter living inside a version of her marriage that her husband constructed around her carefully over years, deciding what she was allowed to see and what she was not. It has to do with the fact that Madison is a smart, capable woman who trusted the person she married, and that trust was used against her as a structural material, built into the walls of something she thought was solid. How much does she actually know? I ask. We can't be certain, Claire says. But based on what you've told me about your conversation with her, my read is that she knows the shape of the problem without knowing its dimensions. She knows there is debt. She does not know it is secured by a legal judgment, that he is in arrears, or that he has been supplementing his income by renting your property without your consent. 3 separate things he hid from her, I say. At minimum, Claire says. I stand up from the chair and walk to the porch rail. Below me, the garden. Behind me, the house Evelyn built. Around me, the particular gray quiet of an Outer Banks morning when the season is turning and the summer people have gone home. Claire, I say. When can I talk to her? Soon, she says. But not yet. I want the trust filed and recorded before you have that conversation. Once the property is inside the trust, Ryan has no legal pathway to it, regardless of what Madison signs or doesn't sign. We close that door first, then you talk to your daughter. And what do I say to her? Claire is quiet for a moment. Not the quiet of not knowing, but the quiet of choosing carefully. You ask her questions, she says. The same way you'd approach a site inspection. You don't tell her what you found. You ask her what she knows, and you let her get there herself. I look at the garden. Evelyn always said the best thing you could do for a plant that had been damaged was not to pull it up, but to give it the right conditions and let it find its own way back toward the light. All right, I say. File the trust. I'll wait. One more thing, Claire says, and her voice shifts slightly, not harder but more precise. The anonymous text you received Saturday. Search Coastal Stays NC. I've been thinking about who sent it. So have I say. I think it's time you found out for certain, she says. Because I believe the person who sent that text knows considerably more than just the listing. And I think they want to tell you. I get to the coffee shop in Nag's Head 15 minutes early. It is a small place 2 blocks from the water with wooden booths and a chalkboard menu and the particular smell of a coffee shop that has been in the same location long enough to have absorbed the salt air into its walls. I choose the corner booth with my back to the wall, old habit, the same reason I always sat facing the door on job sites, and I order a black coffee, and I wait. Claire said I could meet with Madison now that the trust paperwork has been submitted to the Dare County Register of Deeds. She said ask questions, don't deliver conclusions. Let her get there herself. Treat it like a site inspection, not a deposition. I have been thinking about that all week. Madison walks in at 11:03. She is wearing a blue jacket I have not seen before, and she looks tired in a way that goes deeper than sleep, the kind of tired that comes from carrying something heavy for too long without being able to set it down. She spots me in the corner, and something moves across her face that I cannot fully name. Relief, maybe. Or the complicated version of relief that comes when you have been dreading a conversation and you finally walk into the room where it is going to happen. She slides into the booth across from me, wraps both hands around the coffee mug the server brings her. Her knuckles are white. "Daddy," she says. "Hey, sweetheart." She looks at me for a moment, and I can see her trying to read whether I am angry. I work to make sure the answer she finds is no. "How are you doing?" I ask. Her chin trembles once, just once. A small involuntary movement she shuts down immediately. "I've been better," she says honestly, and I appreciate that more than she knows. "I know," I say. "Me too." I let that sit between us for a moment. Then I ask the first question. "Madison, how long has Ryan been worried about money?" She wraps her hands tighter around the mug. "Since before we got married," she says slowly, like she is testing how much weight the words can hold. "He's always had ups and downs. Art dealing isn't a steady income. I knew that going in." "Has he been honest with you about the specifics?" She looks down at the table. A line appears between her brows. Not anger, something more internal than that, the expression of someone running a calculation they have run before and keep getting a number they don't want. "He tells me what he thinks I need to know," she says. "I used to think that was protecting me. Lately, I'm not sure what it is." My chest tightens, but I keep my voice even. "When did you start being not sure?" Madison lifts her eyes to mine. They are red at the edges. She has been crying recently, or close to it, in the way that leaves a mark even after you've pulled yourself together. "About 6 months ago," she says quietly. "He got a phone call one evening and he went out to the car to take it. He was out there for 45 minutes. When he came back in, he said it was a business thing and it was handled, and he smiled and I believed him." She pauses. "I've believed him a lot of things. Did you know he opened a business using my house address?" Her head comes up sharply. "What? A limited liability company," I say. "Coastal Stays NC, registered with my property address as the business address, 7 months ago." The color drains from her face so quickly and so completely that I reach across the table instinctively and she grabs my hand with both of hers and holds on hard, her fingers cold, her grip shaking slightly, like a woman who has just felt the floor shift under her feet and is reaching for the nearest solid thing. "He used your address," she says. Her voice is barely above a whisper, and it cracks straight down the middle on the last word. "Without asking me," I say. Madison makes a sound, not a word, just a sound, something that comes from the back of the throat when the mind is processing too many things at once and the body reacts before language does. Her eyes fill. One tear escapes, and she wipes it away fast and hard, furious at herself, for it's the same gesture Evelyn used to make when she cried at something she thought she shouldn't cry at. "I didn't know," Madison says, and her voice shakes with the specific vibration of someone telling the truth and knowing it isn't enough. "Daddy, I swear I didn't know about any of it. The people staying there, the business, I thought he checked on the house once. I thought he was helping." "I know you didn't know," I say. How can you be sure?" Her voice breaks open on the question, raw and urgent, the voice of someone who is no longer sure of her own judgment and needs someone else to confirm it from the outside. "How can you be sure when I'm not even sure of myself anymore?" I look at my daughter across the table. At the tears she is fighting and the hands still wrapped around mine and the exhaustion that goes deeper than sleep. Because I have spent 35 years learning to tell the difference between someone who is hiding something and someone who has had something hidden from them, I say. "And you, Madison, you have had things hidden from you." She presses her lips together so hard they go white. Her shoulders shake once a single involuntary shudder that she pulls back under control almost immediately, the kind of thing that takes real effort. "What do I do?" she asks. "Right now," I say. "You don't do anything. You let me handle what needs to be handled, and you think about what you want your life to look like." She nods. A small, careful nod like someone moving very slowly through a space where things might break. We sit there together for a few more minutes without talking, just the coffee going warm between us and the salt air coming through the gap under the door. And it is not the worst thing to sit with your daughter in a corner booth in Nag's Head and not need to fill the space with words. She squeezes my hand once before she leaves. Hard. Then she lets go and walks out the door, and I watch her through the window until her car pulls away from the curb. My phone rings 30 seconds later. Unknown number. I answer it. "Mr. Bennett." A woman's voice, careful, quiet, like someone speaking in a house where they don't want to be overheard. "My name is Linda Carter. I think we need to meet. Somewhere quiet. Not at the house." A pause. "And please don't tell Richard." I call Claire from the parking lot of the coffee shop before I start the engine. I tell her about Linda Carter's phone call. Every word of it exactly as it came, the careful voice, the quiet, the "please don't tell Richard" at the end. When I finish, Claire does not respond immediately. I can hear her thinking, which with Claire sounds like a very slight shift in the quality of the silence on the line. "Meet with her," she says finally. "Somewhere public, somewhere neutral. Let her talk first. Don't ask leading questions." A pause. "And Walter, before you do, I need to tell you what my investigator found this morning, because it changes how important that meeting is." I lean back in the seat and look through the windshield at the gray October sky over Nag's Head. "Tell me," I say. Ryan Carter has met twice in the past year with an attorney in Charlotte who specializes exclusively in marital property disputes, Claire says. My investigator found this through the attorney's public appointment calendar and billing records filed with the North Carolina State Bar. The content of those meetings is protected by attorney-client privilege. I cannot know what was said. But the fact of the meetings and the attorney's specialty tell us enough. My hand tightens on the phone. He's been building a case. He has been researching one, Claire says carefully. North Carolina is an equitable distribution state. When a couple divorces, marital property is divided according to what the court considers fair, not necessarily equal. Separate property, meaning assets owned by one spouse before the marriage or received as inheritance, is generally protected. She pauses. However, if Ryan can demonstrate that Madison had an active role in managing or maintaining your property through documents like the authorization letter she signed, he could attempt to argue that she developed an equitable interest in the asset. It is a difficult argument. But it is not an impossible one, and it becomes considerably less difficult if he has 2 years of preparation behind it. The October sky outside the windshield is the color of old concrete. How do we stop it? I ask. We already have, Claire says, and her voice carries the particular satisfaction of someone who has spent a week building something that is now ready. The revocable living trust was recorded with the Dare County Register of Deeds this morning. The property is no longer a personal asset subject to equitable distribution claims. It belongs to the trust. Ryan Carter has no legal pathway to it, regardless of what argument he constructs, regardless of what Madison signed, regardless of anything he has been planning for 2 years. She stops. We closed the door before he reached it. Something loosens in my chest. Not relief exactly, but the absence of a specific tension that has been sitting there for 2 weeks. The demand letter, I say. Goes out Monday, Claire says. Trespass. Unauthorized commercial use. Unjust enrichment. Fraudulent business registration. The authorization letter. Every item documented, every dollar accounted for. The number at the bottom will make Gerald Fitch's implied license argument look like what it is. A brief pause. Ryan called you again this morning. I know, I say. I let it go. Good. Forward it to me and don't respond. He is calling because he knows the window is closing and he wants to find out how much you know before it does. Her voice shifts slightly, not harder but more direct. Walter, go meet with Linda Carter. Whatever she knows, we need it on the record before the demand letter goes out. Because if Richard was involved in planning this from the beginning, that changes the scope of what we're dealing with considerably. I start the engine. Ryan calls again as I pull out of the parking lot. The phone buzzes on the seat beside me, his name on the screen. That pleasant face in the contact photo that Madison took at someone's birthday party 3 years ago. He is smiling in it. He is always smiling. I watch the call go to voicemail without touching the phone. Then I pull onto the highway and I drive north toward Kill Devil Hills, where Linda Carter is waiting for me at a corner table in a restaurant she chose, because it is far enough from her house that Richard won't drive past it by accident. I think about what Claire said. We closed the door before he reached it. I think about Evelyn putting seeds in frozen March ground for a garden she knew she might not see bloom. She understood something I am only now beginning to fully grasp, that the most important work is the work you do before the problem arrives. Not after. Not in response. Before. I drive north into the gray October morning and I think about what Linda Carter is about to tell me. The restaurant Linda chose is a small seafood place on the main road in Kill Devil Hills, the kind of establishment that has been in the same building since the 1980s and has no particular interest in updating its decor because its regulars don't come for the decor. Vinyl booths, laminate tables, a specials board written in marker that has not changed significantly since Tuesday. It is exactly the kind of place where nobody pays attention to anyone else's conversation. Linda is already there when I arrive. Corner booth, back wall, facing the door, the same instinct I have, which tells me something about how long she has been thinking about this meeting. She is a small woman, 62, with silver hair cut short, and hands that she keeps folded on the table in front of her, like she is trying to keep them still. She looks up when I come in, and something in her face relaxes slightly. Not relief, more like the expression of someone who has been holding their breath and has finally decided to let it out. I slide into the booth across from her. The server comes and we both order coffee and neither of us looks at the menu. "Thank you for coming," Linda says. "Thank you for calling," I say. "And for the text." She nods once. "I didn't want my name on it yet. I needed to know you'd look first." She looks down at her hands for a moment. Then she lifts her eyes to mine and says, "I need you to know that I didn't agree to any of this. I want that on the record before anything else." "All right," I say. "Richard started talking about your house before Ryan and Madison got married," she says. Her voice is steady, but there is effort behind it. The effort of someone who has rehearsed this and is now discovering that rehearsed words feel different when you say them out loud to the person they affect. At the engagement party, this was 4 years ago, he pulled aside a man he used to do business with, and he said, "My boy is marrying into beachfront property." He said it like it was a return on an investment. She stops. Her jaw tightens. I heard him say it from across the room. I told myself it was just talk. Richard says a lot of things. But it wasn't just talk, I say. "No." She reaches into her purse and takes out her phone. Her hands are not quite steady as she unlocks it and turns the screen toward me. 8 months ago, Richard sent an email to a property developer in Raleigh. A man named Garrett, who builds luxury condominiums on the Carolina coast. Richard sent it from his personal account, but he had our joint email address copied on it. I don't think he realized it. Or he forgot. She pauses. I read it that night. I saved it. I look at the screen. The email is 2 paragraphs. The first paragraph introduces Richard Carter as a representative with access to a beachfront property in Dare County, currently held in private ownership, available for acquisition pending family arrangements being finalized. The second paragraph describes the property: 3 bedrooms, private lot, ocean views, existing dock, excellent development potential for high-end coastal residential. He described Evelyn's house to a developer as available for acquisition. He said family arrangements being finalized, like the house was already moving toward him. And the only remaining question was the paperwork. My coffee sits untouched in front of me. My hands are flat on the table and I am pressing them down harder than necessary. Not because I am angry, I am past the acute stage of anger somewhere in the country beyond it that is quieter and more dangerous, but because I need to feel something solid under my palms. "There are more," Linda says. Her voice drops lower. "He followed up twice," Garrett responded. They discussed price ranges, timelines. Richard told him that the property would be accessible to the family within the next 2 to 3 years. She swallows. He said that like he had already decided it. "Does Madison know about any of this?" I ask. Linda shakes her head, and her eyes go bright with something that is not quite tears, but is close to them. "Madison doesn't know what her father-in-law has been doing with her marriage," she says. "And Ryan." She stops, starts again. "Ryan is his father's son. He learned from the best." The bitterness in those words is old and settled, the kind that comes from years of watching something and being unable to stop it. "Why are you telling me this, Linda?" I ask. She looks at me directly, and her chin lifts slightly, and she says, "Because I have a daughter-in-law who deserves better than what this family has been doing to her. And because..." She stops again. Her throat moves. Because Evelyn would have done the same thing. The restaurant noise continues around us, the clatter of plates, the low murmur of other people's conversations, the sound of the specials board being updated by someone in the back. None of it touches the inside of the booth. I reach across the table. Can you send me those emails? Already forwarded them to myself from the joint account, she says. I can send them to you right now. Send them to my attorney, I say, and I give her Claire's email address. Linda types carefully, her reading glasses on. Now her fingers slow and deliberate. When she hits send, she looks up at me, and there is something in her face that I recognize, the particular expression of a person who has just done the thing they knew they needed to do, and is now finding out what it feels like on the other side of doing it. Like stepping off a ledge and discovering the ground was closer than you thought. What happens now? She asks. My attorney sends a letter to Garrett's office today. I say. Cease and desist. He'll be informed that the property is not available, was never available, and that any further discussions constitute reliance on a fraudulent misrepresentation. I pause. And the rest of it goes into the file we're building. Linda nods. She picks up her coffee finally, and I notice that her hands have steadied. We sit for a few minutes longer, and she tells me small things, the way Richard spoke about the house at family dinners, the comments he made to Ryan, that she overheard the gradual accumulation of a plan that she watched take shape over 4 years, without ever quite finding the moment to say, stop. I should have said something sooner, she says. You're saying it now? I say. She drives away first. I sit in the booth for a few minutes after she leaves, and I think about what Claire said this morning. We closed the door before he reached it. Richard Carter spent 4 years walking toward a door that no longer exists. I leave a 20 on the table and walk out into the October afternoon. Claire's conference room is on the 4th floor of a building on Wachita Avenue in Raleigh, and it has a long table, a window that looks out over the street, and a box of tissues on the credenza that nobody in this room is going to want to be seen reaching for. I arrive 20 minutes early. I sit at the far end of the table with my folder in front of me and my hands flat on the surface, and I look out the window at the December street below the bare trees, the gray sky, the ordinary Friday morning traffic of people who have no idea what is happening on the 4th floor of this building. I am wearing the navy suit Evelyn bought me for our 30th anniversary. I have not worn it since her funeral. It still fits, which surprises me every time, as though I expected grief to change the dimensions of a man. Claire sits to my left. Her paralegal takes a chair near the door with a legal pad. The recorder on the table is on the red light visible to everyone, and nobody has asked for it to be turned off. Madison and Ryan arrive first. Madison looks at me the moment she walks in, a look that carries everything she cannot say in front of her husband, a whole conversation compressed into 2 seconds of eye contact. Her hands are clasped in front of her, and her knuckles are pale. Ryan pulls out her chair before sitting down himself, which is the kind of gesture that looks like consideration and is actually management. Richard and Linda arrive 9 minutes late. Richard is wearing a blazer and the expression of a man who has decided he is the aggrieved party. Linda sits down without looking at him. Claire begins without preamble. She lays the trespass report on the table and reads the date, the deputy's name, the names of the individuals formally trespassed. Richard rolls his eyes toward the ceiling. Claire does not pause. She lays the camera footage summary 6 unauthorized entries, 11 consecutive days, timestamps and dates. She lays the garage photographs 14 boxes, professional packing, 0 documentation. She lays the LLC filing coastal stays, NC Ryan Carter registered address my property without my consent. She lays the rental revenue summary 4 groups, 26 nights, $7,514. Ryan's jaw tightens. He says nothing. She lays the emails between Richard and the Raleigh developer, Garrett's name, the price discussions, the phrase family arrangements being finalized. Richard's hand comes down flat on the table. Those were private, Claire. They were forwarded to me by someone with access to the account they were sent from. They are admissible. Richard looks at Linda. Linda looks at the window. Linda. His voice drops low and hard. You did this. Linda turns to look at her husband directly, and her voice, when it comes, is steadier than anything else in the room. I did what was right, she says, which is more than I can say for what you've been doing for 4 years. Richard's face goes red from the collar up. His mouth opens. Claire sets one more document on the table and his mouth closes. The authorization letter, signed with my name in Madison's handwriting. Claire explains forgery under North Carolina Statute 14-119. She explains how it was used. She explains who benefited from it. Madison's eyes go to the letter, then to Ryan. Ryan opens his briefcase. He places a document on the table, the property management authorization, 8 months old. Madison's genuine signature, his explanation of its purpose printed at the top, in a font that looks official and means nothing. Madison signed this voluntarily, Ryan says. His voice is pleasant. His voice is always pleasant. It establishes her role in managing the property, and by extension, nothing, Claire says. She places the final document on the table, the Revocable Living Trust, recorded with the Dare County Register of Deeds, dated 3 weeks ago. The property transferred into trust prior to this meeting. The authorization letter is legally moot. There is no claim, no interest, and no pathway. It's done. Ryan looks at the trust document. Something moves behind his eyes, not anger, not surprise. The specific expression of a man watching a long calculation come out wrong. Madison looks at the authorization letter still sitting in Ryan's hand. She looks at the words at the top, the explanation he typed about medical emergencies, about protecting her father, about why she needed to sign quickly that evening, when they were going out to dinner, and he had the keys in his hand and the documents already spread on the kitchen table. Her face does something I have not seen it do since she was a child, and understood for the first time that a thing she believed was not true. Ryan. Her voice is very quiet. You told me that was for if Daddy got sick. Ryan opens his mouth. Madison turns to Claire. I want my own attorney to review everything before I say anything else. Richard says, Madison, don't. Linda says, Richard, stop. He stops. I look at my daughter across the table. She is not crying. Her chin is up and her hands are still, and she looks like a woman who has just made a decision she will not be walking back from. I'll wait as long as you need, I say. She nods once. And that is enough. 3 weeks after the meeting in Claire's conference room, an envelope arrives at my house in Wilmington. No letter inside, no note. Just a cashier's check for $7,514 made out to Walter James Bennett, drawn on an account I don't recognize. Which means Ryan used an account Madison doesn't know about to pay it. Which tells me the paying was not something he wanted her to see. I photograph the check front and back and send it to Claire before I deposit it. She calls within the hour. Settlement terms have been met on the financial restitution, she says. Ryan's attorney also confirmed this morning that Coastal Stays NC has been formally dissolved with the North Carolina Secretary of State. The LLC no longer exists. And the IRS notification, filed last week, she says. What they do with it is their business. We've done what we're required to do. A pause. Richard received the demand letter on Monday. Gerald Fitch called me Tuesday morning. I expect a response before Christmas. I sit with that for a moment. Richard Carter receiving a demand letter from a Raleigh attorney 2 weeks before Christmas, in a house where Linda now knows everything and is no longer pretending otherwise. I find I do not feel the satisfaction I expected to feel. What I feel is closer to tired, the specific tiredness that comes at the end of a long inspection, when you have found everything there is to find and written it all down, and the building is finally thoroughly documented. The work is done. The feeling comes later, if it comes at all. I am sitting on the back porch with my coffee when Madison calls on a Thursday morning in mid-December. She has retained her own attorney, a woman in Charlotte who handles family law, and has been meeting with her twice a week since the day after the conference room. She has not discussed the substance of those meetings with me, which is correct, and which I have respected completely. What she says when she calls is this: "Daddy, I filed this morning." 4 words. I hear everything in them, the weight of the decision, the exhaustion of the weeks leading up to it, and underneath both of those things, something that is not quite relief, but is moving in that direction. I know, I say, which is not something I actually know, but is the right thing to say. She makes a sound that is half laugh and half something else entirely. "How do you always know?" "I don't," I say. "I just know you." She is quiet for a moment on the other end of the line, and I can hear her breathing, and it is the breathing of someone who has set down something very heavy and is still feeling the absence of the weight in their arms. "Are you okay?" I ask. "I will be," she says. "I think I will be." "That's enough," I say. "That's exactly enough." After we hang up, I sit on the porch for a long time. The December light on the water is thin and pale, the kind of winter light that makes everything look clean and simplified, stripped down to its essential shapes. The sunflower garden along the south fence is dormant, now bare stalks, dried flower heads, still attached the whole bed, waiting for March, the way it has waited every winter for 25 years. I think about what this fall has cost. The weeks of work, the documents and the phone calls and the conference room and the cashier's check with no note. I think about Madison in a Charlotte attorney's office twice a week, building a new version of her life out of the wreckage of a marriage that was never as solid as she believed. And I think about Ryan Carter somewhere in this December, in possession of considerably less than he came in with, and no clear path forward toward anything he planned. I don't feel triumphant about that. A man who schemes for 2 years and fails is still a man who spent 2 years of his life on the wrong thing. There is no version of that story where anybody wins cleanly. What I feel sitting on this porch in December is something simpler than a triumph. I feel like the house is mine again, not in the legal sense. It was always mine in the legal sense, and the trust has made that permanent in ways that will outlast me. But mine in the way that matters more than that. Mine in the way that Evelyn intended when she stood in that empty driveway in 1998 and said, "Yes, this is the one that faces the water." My phone buzzes. A text from Madison. "Can I come down sometime soon? I want to help with the garden." Mom always planted in March, right? I look at the dormant sunflower bed and I type back every single March. "Come whenever you're ready." Madison arrives on a Saturday morning in early March, without calling first. I am already in the garden when I hear her car in the driveway, standing in the dormant sunflower bed with a bag of seeds in my hand, and the February light, thin and cold, off the Atlantic behind me. I hear the car door close. I hear her footsteps on the gravel. I don't turn around right away. I just look down at the ground in front of me, the dark soil, the dried stalks still standing from last season. The bed that has been waiting since October for someone to put seeds back into it. Madison comes around the corner of the house and stops when she sees me. She's holding a bag of seeds, too. We look at each other across the dormant garden, and something moves between us that doesn't need a name. She walks toward me, and I open my arms, and she steps into them and holds on, and I hold on back, and we stay like that for a long moment in the February cold, with the Atlantic behind us, and the bare garden in front of us, and everything that happened last fall sitting quietly in the space around us, like furniture that has finally been moved to where it belongs. Then she pulls back and looks at the garden and says, "Where do we start?" We work through the morning, side by side on our knees in the February dirt, pressing seeds into the soil the way Evelyn taught Madison to do when she was 7 years old, and thought gardening was the most important thing in the world. It is slow work and cold work, and it is exactly the right work for a Saturday morning in February, when you have a lot to say to someone and no particular need to say it yet. At some point, Madison asks, "She did this every year?" "Every single March," I say. She said the ground needed to be ready before the seeds could do anything. Madison looks at the soil in front of her for a moment. Then she says, "I think I'm starting to understand that." We finish around noon. I make coffee and we sit on the back porch, Madison in one of the regular chairs, me in the teak chair, both of us looking out at the Atlantic and the freshly turned garden bed below. "Daddy," she says after a while, "thank you for not giving up on this place." "Thank you for coming back to it," I say. "Here is what I want to tell you, because this is the part that matters, and I have been thinking about how to say it since September. The people who take things from you rarely start by taking. They start by making you feel like you don't need what you have, like it's sitting empty, like it's going to waste, like you're being selfish for holding on to something that could benefit so many people. They make you feel like the reasonable thing, the generous thing, the family thing is to let go. Don't let go. Not of the things that matter. Not of the house Evelyn built, or the garden she planted, or the chair she picked out, because it was the only one built for watching the ocean. Not of anything that someone you loved put their hands on and made into something more than it was before they touched it. Hold on to it. Protect it. And if someone tries to take it, stay in the truck, call the county, build the file. Because love is not a reason to let people walk through you. Sometimes it's the reason you have to make sure they can't. Comment 1 if you think I did right, calling the sheriff before I said a single word. Comment 2 if you think I should have handled it differently. And comment 3, tell me what you're holding on to. The thing someone has been telling you that you don't need anymore. Tell me what it is and how long you've been hearing that. I'll be right here. The seeds are in the ground. Spring is coming. And the teak chair is exactly where Evelyn left it. I have thought about this a lot, sitting in that teak chair watching the ocean. I was not a perfect father. I kept that house closed for 4 years, because grief was easier to manage from a distance. I let people move past the line every season and told myself it wasn't worth the friction. Don't be me. Object early, object small, object in writing. I believe God puts the right people in our path at the right moment, and sometimes grace arrives in the most unexpected faces. Here is my personal opinion, for whatever it is worth. The people who truly love you do not need to take from you. And the people who take from you were never really loving you to begin with. The stories that matter most are never the ones we planned for. The family drama revenge that tears a family apart rarely begins with something dramatic. It begins with a borrowed key, a forged letter, a silence held one season too long. If this story reached you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. These family stories' revenge run deeper than property lines and legal documents, and on this channel, another family drama revenge story finds its way to the light every single week. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. Upcoming stories may contain fictional elements constructed for educational purposes. If this content is not right for you, we respect your choice to find something better suited.